A lot of them have a really good work ethic, and some students will come to school on horseback, right? We have stables where students will pull up and they'll leave their horse there while they go to school, you know. The most important thing for this student is not turning his homework, for them not to do this assignment when it was due. Some of these kids are experiencing abuse at the house. There's not enough shelter, there's not enough food at home, and sometimes the least of their worries is whatever deadline you gave them. At the end of the day, kids are going through so much. What's very different about teaching than any other job is that when you're teaching, you are there. Your mind is, and all your faculties have to be there, and you don't get to break off of it. I have a young lady, her name is Stephanie. Stephanie came in not knowing what a wrench was to my classroom. And the other day she came in and she comes in, she's like, yeah, man, I was diagnosing this wheel bearing issue and the ABS. I was looking at the ABS module and I was just standing there like, and I had a smile on my face, like, Stephanie, like, I'm so proud of you. Like, do you hear yourself? What you just told me has shown your growth in this whole time that you've been here.
We are thrilled to meet Josh Marmolejo, a mechanical engineer turned educator from Clint High School in Texas. Joshua has been instrumental in putting Clint, Texas on the national education map. Josh is an expert at the crossroads of education and technology. He grew up with two passions, taking things apart to see how they worked and helping people around him. This spirit of service has earned Josh the 2024-25 Milken Educator Award, making Josh the first recipient in Clint history and placing him amongst the nation's most influential K-12 teachers. Josh also lends his expertise to the El Paso Community College's Career Advisory Committee. Josh builds bridges between classroom and the workforce through the region. It's a pleasure to have Josh on the show. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Josh, there's so much to talk today, but before we begin, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's a little bit of a story. I'll try to make it as short as I can, but it all started when I was in elementary school. I had a friend, and his dad had a go-kart where we would ride around the neighborhood in it. And he had told me that if I got good grades, he would give me his old go-kart because he was going to get his son the newer one because he always rewarded him for getting good grades at school. Long story short, I had my own go-kart and we would ride around the neighborhood. One thing led to another. It was first just starting about how it works, trying to make it faster and challenging each other and going around the neighborhood. And that's how it started. I was very fortunate at a young age that I knew what I wanted to do. I started tinkering with cars all throughout my teenage years, but I didn't actually get professional training until I graduated high school. I graduated high school. I started working in an independent shop. I got my certifications while I was working at an independent shop. I became an ASE Master Certified Technician, and I got a level 1 specialist certification as well. And this whole time that I was going to work, I was also going to college. When I started learning how all these systems worked, I wanted what was the next phase. If I was working on these systems, I would often ask myself, well, what can I learn how these systems are designed, you know? So that's what I did. I enrolled into mechanical engineering. I spent a few years there, graduated in 2016 from a mechanical engineering degree. And my intention was to work at a level where I could be a little bit more involved in the designing and the aspect of automotive. But in order to do that, I would probably have to move to Detroit or somewhere where there was the opportunity. So I graduated school. My wife was an educator at the time and still is. And we had a deal. We said, okay, if in 6 months I don't find a job, we're going to have to leave town. And she said, okay, that's perfectly fine, but you also have to keep your end of the deal and you have to go out there and search, right? And here locally. So I went to church one day and there was there was a friend there that said, "Hey, our district is looking for someone to teach automotive vocational school." And at the time, I that's not what I wanted to do, and that's not ever what I had planned to do. But I had a deal with my wife, and I said, "You know what? It's going to give me something starting, get some work experience going until I can find what I really want to do." So I went, I met the principal. I applied online, but I wanted to show up and shake his hand because I thought this is my name, but you don't know who is applying whenever you apply online. So I got to meet him. I said, "This is my resume." And he called me the very next day and said, "When can you start?" So I started in mid-February, and then I ended the school year of that fiscal year. So the next year, when it came time to renew my contract, I was kind of curious to see, okay, well, if these 2, 3 months that I had in school were pretty good, what can the next year be like? And that turned into me signing the contract for the following year. And one year has turned into 9 years now. And that's how I came into the education system. I never intended it. It was kind of, I guess, an accident, you can say, a blessing in disguise.
Awesome, Josh. So growing up, it started with the go-kart, but I guess that was your love for seeing how things worked. Was it problem solving? Did you love that part? Were you always tinkering? I think you said that, but can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I think, and I still experience it now. I don't think it's really it's the building and the challenge of having a problem that I really fell in love with because we would think of ways, how can we make this thing faster? If I can get to that distance quicker, then how can I take off the air filter? Would that create less restriction? And it's like an ongoing science project. It's never ending because you're always trying to search what the next advantage is. So it really was just I fell in love with troubleshooting, problem solving, and sometimes having a theory and that it's not really correct at all, and it teaches you a whole other thing. But that's probably what really drew me to that field. It was very analytical, very hands-on, where you can use every faculty, smell, sight. You can hear when an engine's not right, and it really I fell in love with being able to troubleshoot in that manner.
Awesome, Josh. And then mechanical engineering. How was college itself? How was the college experience studying mechanical engineering?
And I tell you, so look, I got married when I was a senior in high school. I met my high school sweetheart in as a senior in high school. I was 18 years old at the time, and we knew we were serious. We knew that we had met the one we considered our sweetheart, and we got married. So being married, having to work and having to go to school was really challenging. I mean, you think of the rigor of an engineering program, and it was really tough. For a moment, I was very discouraged. I almost felt like, you know what, is this really even worth my time? You know, and should I even keep going? But my wife was a great support, and she said, you know what, just keep going at it. And there was a point where she was working full time as an educator, and I was able to take a semester off so that I can just focus on school. And I really needed that help because without that, I couldn't balance all these things at one time.
Yeah, and then being a 18-year-old, most 18-year-olds don't have to deal with multiple things like working. Were you working full time or part time?
Yeah, I was working full time. We both worked full time and we went to school full time. So we were living on our own and we had an apartment and we had to make means. We had to do what we could with what we had. So it was tough. It was a lot of things to balance as a couple, as a newlywed couple, as college students being 18, 19 years old. But it's been a blessing and it's really honored to be here.
Yep, I think your wife has had a very strong impact role. She's worked with you to make this happen. So, that is so remarkable.
Yeah.
So, you studied mechanical engineering, happened to be become an educator. How was it the first 3 months? How was it in school? Back as a teacher now.
And I remember the very first time. I remember when my wife was an educator, and she would always come home and tell me, "Man, I've had such a long day. It was really tough today." And at the time, I worked a labor job, and I used to think to myself, you work Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. You're in an air conditioned facility. There's heat. There's nothing to. Why are you tired? Why are you this tired? And I didn't understand it until I'm myself an educator. And I remember the very first time I walked into class, they gave me this roster and they told me, here's how you take attendance. Here's who you assign all the breakfast to. You have to do this at this time. You have to take attendance for this period at this time. You have to make sure that you're teaching all of these children all these different theories and methods, and everyone has a different learning style. It was just overwhelming. I said, there's no way I'm gonna be able to do this for until the end of the year. But in my mind, I guess I kept telling myself it's only until the end of the year. And then I started another year and I keep telling myself that. But I've really learned to really I enjoy what I do, because although it has its challenges, being in a classroom can be very rewarding. And it's not something that you can explain to someone unless they're in that classroom themselves.
Awesome, Josh. So the first 3 months were you were just trying to get a feel of how it was, and I'm sure it went by very quickly. And then how was the second year, the first full academic year for you?
The first year was good because I was able to start with from day one. I established my classroom routines. I established what I wanted, the expectation of being in the classroom from the students. And I was really excited because I had just spent all this time just gathering knowledge about machines and everything that I learned in school, that I was so excited to teach it uh, to young children. And I said, you know what? Um, let me start off the full year. And it was a learning curve because I was so rigid. I was just, this is how it has to be done. This is how, in my mind, that's how teaching was. It wasn't until the end of my first year that I said, you know what, there's this that I can do different next year. I could be better at developing rapport with my students, being able to do it really is an art, to be able to teach someone. There's a lot of good professionals in the field, but not everyone can teach material to somebody. So it was more about building student culture, student rapport, because kids won't, they're students and they're kids after all. They respect you, but they don't really want to learn from you unless you know that you care for them.
So the first year was more, I gotta get all these things done, and the second year you realize that it's not gonna work out until you do something different with the kids, right? I guess the problem solving mindset that you had developed even as a kid, and then later on, and when studying engineering kicked in, right? So what did you see with the students? What was their reaction in year one and year two, and which made you feel that no, this is not going to work out unless I build a rapport?
I remember my principal having an observation. He was so excited because I was teaching, I was teaching these students automotive theory, but there's so much science and mathematics that goes into automotive and engineering. I remember when he walked in, I was showing him the periodic table. We were talking about how oxygen that an engine takes in has mass, and I was referring to the periodic table because every single element has a mass number. So we were talking about that, and he walked in, and he's of course as a STEM campus. They love when they see science being integrated and mathematics into CTE classes. So he was excited for it, and I was excited too, but I felt like I still didn't have that relationship with my students. So then just by slow tutoring, my observation reviews, you can make this better. You can have a little bit of more humor in your lessons. You don't have to be as stringent with your lesson, and just letting time go by is kind of how I started changing my teaching method. And I'm not so tunnel vision now, and that I was my first second year.
Understood. Is it more around establishing one-on-one rapport? Is it more establishing a group rapport? How does that work? What are the classroom dynamics that you have found to work?
I think it's both, and I think it is individual rapport as well as classroom culture. I focus more on classroom culture than I do individual because there's 20, 30 kids at one point, and you only have so much time that you can devote to each student. So, well, I think once you establish your classroom culture, students start to come to you, and then they feel more comfortable to develop rapport with you now on a one-to-one basis. I think we also have a different kind of student at Clint High School because Clint is a rural small town, and a lot of the students that go to Clint High School are from farms. A lot of them have a really good work ethic, and a lot some students will come to school on horseback ride. We have stables where students will pull up and they'll leave their horse there while they go to school. So we have a different kind of student at Clinton High School, which I think help tremendously in our success. And I can't take no credit for that. I think my students are the ones that really have helped shaped that classroom culture. But it definitely, I think classroom culture goes a long way because you only have so much time and so many resources to get to each student that once you establish that culture, then students feel comfortable. They feel more comfortable around their peers. They're not scared to make a mistake because they feel like they're all in the same boat.
So, how big is Clint? You said it's small, but how big is
Yeah.
small?
So I think Clint's got about maybe 20,000 people.
Yeah, and then you grew up in El Paso,
Yes,
Josh?
I did. I've known of Clint. I've gone to Clint. I have an aunt that lives in Clint, but I've never, other than being here in the city, I guess unless you have family that lives there, there's not really a reason for us to visit Clint often.
Understood. And then, how was it growing up in El Paso?
We're a border town. We are. El Paso is a very tight community. It's kind of a retirement place. A lot of people come to El Paso to retire. We used to have really low cost of living, so that attracted a lot of people who wanted to just right off into the sunset, I guess you can say, for retirement. But I always knew El Paso to be my hometown just because I've been from here. We have really good food, Mexican food. We're across the border from Mexico, and very tight community, very, very, very close community, and very proud to be here.
Awesome, Josh. Josh, so you studied mechanical engineering. Engineering in general in our country is very rigorous, right? Of course, you brought the engineering knowledge, but how
Yeah,
was it to go from
right.
learning engineering, which is you would assume at a higher degree, but I know your students are very hands-on, they're very practical, right? And they can do a lot. So how was that transition, and what habits or skills proved valuable for you?
When I was in high school, I knew enough to get by without me putting much effort into high school, which was, I didn't know it at the time, but it kind of hurt me as I got into college because I wouldn't do just enough to be able to pass and get by. But I didn't know the danger and the damage that I was doing to myself in the long term. Because as soon as I got to college and I started taking these courses, I thought I had the same mentality. I had not changed. So it taught me and it humbled me real quick to be able to see some of the things that I had to learn, some of the theories, the disciplines that are in engineering. And it was it was not an easy shift, but I had to start hanging around with people that were like-minded. That was one of the very first things I did so that I can form study groups, so that I can start getting involved and being able to pass my courses. I would say one of the biggest skills that I have learned in engineering is is how to think about problems. I think a lot of people sometimes think that because you go to engineering school, you have all this information about so many things. And that's really not the case because engineering is the focus of one small discipline that you learn. Oh yeah, you have so many disciplines and you know so much about so many different things. But no, it's just this minute detail about this field that you're studying. So I think engineering really taught me about how to approach a problem and how to think about a problem and learning in principles, not really in learning and memorizing formulas, but knowing how physics works, how does heat transfer work, how does thermodynamics take into account into a machine, you know? So I think learning how to think about a problem is more important than remembering a problem. And I think that's a skill that I still to date I use. I use it every day in automotive. What was the first step that I took to be able to accomplish fully mastering that skill? And it's by repetition and mistake. You think sometimes that when things are going well is when you make the most growth, but it's usually when you have a failure when you really learn like, okay, well, this is the most growth that I'm doing right now. So I think I try to apply that same philosophy to my teaching now. I try to put myself in the shoes of my students. I try to scaffold them. You know, I don't overload them with information, especially with students now that they have a limited attention span with technology. You know, so you have to really find creative ways to be more interesting than a cell phone. You know, you really have to be innovative in ways that how can I be more captivating than all of these social media entertainers and all of these methods. So it's definitely been a challenge, but those are some of the skills that I think I've learned in engineering that I apply now to my teaching.
Very interesting, Josh. So, in some ways, it is Instagram versus Josh in the classroom, right? Right in front of them, they have those options and
Yeah.
how to make it in your favor. I never thought of it that way, but that totally makes sense. So, have you ended up like changing curriculums and approaches? Of course, you seem to have a very personal approach. What happens today that was different than many years ago?
I think everything is just so accessible to students. And I've seen it in the good and the bad. You know, you have access to students and they have access to things that they should never have access to as children. However, I think one of the things that I like to do in the classroom is kind of like I approach that same philosophy that I told you earlier. How can I be more captivating than some of these social media platforms, or even taking some good points from them? You know, they're really good at captivating audiences and keeping their attention. And how can I do that in my teaching? So that's how we kind of developed our teaching. We teach only on Mondays. We teach theories. We teach principles. We teach automotive basics. We teach electricity. We teach whatever the course might be for that semester. And then the actual application, where do you get to make the actual mistake, is on Tuesdays through Fridays. So we have lab work on Tuesdays through Fridays, and for me, I feel that's where the students really make the most growth because I can tell them all about what electricity is like. I can tell them all about a 12-volt system, but when they have to diagnose an issue on an electronic system, and then they get shocked by a coil, by an ignition coil. It has 300,000 volts, whatever the coil puts out. It has a different meaning to you than what you see on the board. You know, if a car runs on 12 volts, you can literally put your hands on the circuit. You can become part of the circuit, but because your body has too much resistance, it doesn't do nothing to you. So
Yeah.
now the kids can relate. What is 12 volts like? And if I ever see 12 volts somewhere, is it going to take my life, you know? Or is no, I mean, cars now, electronic vehicles, they have direct current and there's thousands of volts, and they know the difference. Okay, this is 12 volts, this is, 500,000 volts or whatever the case might be, an application that they're using. But we also learn X and Y systems, right? We talk about exponentials, we talk about linear relationships, and XY system, I also teach them very basic. We have a machine that will cut pieces of metal that we make brackets for different components around the shop, and it works on an X and Y axis. And the machine could have a marker, it could have a pencil, it could have a torch to cut metal. It's no different to the machine. And I tell them, okay, this is the XY point, this is your origin, this is the point where you start. If you have to draw a plate that's 4 inches by 4 inches, and this is a 0, 0 point, where is my next point? And that's algebra. That's literally an X and Y algebra relationship. And sometimes some kids will make the connection. Oh wow, this is what we learned in algebra class. Like, yes, this is why it's important for you to know slope. This is why it's important for you to know where the origin is, where the quadrants are. And we're not even talking on the z-axis. But I think that's one thing that I try to focus the most on is if I teach something, I have to hold the students accountable for it later on during actual application. If you don't, sometimes you lose the kids in that realm.
Josh, in your journey, you joined, you spent the 3 months. Next year was a full year. What happened in years two, three, and four beyond that, or years three, four, five?
I think year 3, 4 is probably when I started really, like I said, I changed my mentality of that rigor, and I started really building good relationship with students. And what's funny you say that because my first 2 or 3 years, I didn't have a single thank you card on my board. And years 3, 4, and 5 is when I started getting, oh, thank you for being such a good role model in my life. We've learned so much from you. And now I have this huge board of just thank you cards, and I have to staple them on top of each other because there's no space. But I think that's a good indicator of not only you can teach something, but are you emotionally connected to your students? And how do you measure that? You really don't. You don't know that. And I guess that's the way I measure it. How many thank you cards do I have on my board?
Yeah. So for teachers listening, if you don't have thank you cards, then that might be a sign to work on the emotional connection
Right.
with the kids, right?
Right.
That's very interesting. And so years three, four, five, you really worked on building the emotional connection, getting to know your students. Obviously, that had a great impact on them, which translated to results. And then when did the vision for PTech start forming?
So it was right around that time. So year 4 or so, I had an assistant principal at the time, and I went to school with his daughter. We were both mechanical engineers, and we were just talking, and he said, you know what, why don't we start a dual credit academy, where we give these kids dual credit. At the time when he said that, I said, this is just another admin coming to my classroom trying to give me something else to do. Uh, but after had some time to reflect it and really think about it, I said, you know what? Why not? What is holding back? And I said, you know what? Let's do it. Let me apply for credentialing at the local college and see what I can get credentialed for, and then let's get going. So I talked to my principal. We were officially going to start our PTech Academy through our vet tech classes, and there was some issue with credentialing or certification that they couldn't go through them. And then they thought, why don't we go through automotive? And it was like a blessing. It was such a blessing because automotive does not attract this kind of students that want to be doctors, that want to be lawyers, that want to be engineers. It's a sad reality, but they attract the students that say, I don't want nothing to do with school. I just want to jump into the field, and then I want to start getting money and making money. But as these students enroll in this program, they say, hey, you know what? I took 1301, I took 1310, I took 1307. It wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. And then now you have students that are graduating with their associate's degree. I'm halfway there. If you really enjoyed learning, I don't know, if you really enjoyed circuits in automotive that you took, maybe that leads to computer science, and then now you're able to do so many other different things with computer science. So and that was how it started. It was our fourth, fifth year, and then now we're on our fourth, fifth year now because I've been here on going on 10 years.
Josh, one thing you talked early on, and people have known that there are varied learning modalities, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and so forth. How do you discover that in a kid, in a learner, and how do you then change your style to meet that? Because that could vary within the class itself.
I think the students will tell you, if you spend enough time in the classroom, you'll figure it out really quick. You'll have students who do really well in the classroom setting and they're fully engaged. You can see it in their faces. It's not really something that I can tell you. When you're there and you know it, it's like if you've ever spoken in front of a crowd, you make contact with the audience and you know whose attention you have. It's kind of like that. Students will tell you, and they won't be afraid to tell you, you know what? No, no, I'm not. I'm not the kind to be able to sit, read a book, and know how something works. Can we go to the shop? Can you show me in a shop setting? Can you show me a video? Or what is the picture like? What is, So those are different ways that I've been able to find out as I spent time with students. And sometimes kids, you cannot take it personal. If you take it personal, it'll tear you up because kids are kids. At the end of the day, you have so many kids are going through so much that we forget as teachers that the most important thing for this student is not to turn in his homework, for them not to do this assignment when it was due. Some of these kids are experiencing abuse at the house. Some are experiencing there's not enough shelter, there's not enough food at home. And sometimes the least of their worries is whatever deadline you gave them. So just being able to, but that goes to back to classroom culture and student rapport. If you know them, you're able to kind of figure these things out, and kids will tell you. If you just ask and you show some kind of interest, they'll tell you, and they'll tell you what's going on and say, you know what, I'm suffering from anxiety. It just has not been a good year for me. My parents are just sick, or I've been sick, or whatever the case may be.
Yep, yep. Understood, Josh. Josh, in all of this, you said something very interesting early on that you found it, when you started teaching, you used to wonder why your wife said, "Why is it so tiring?" Right? And then you later on realize, oh my God, this is something so hard. You've done that 10 years.
Yeah.
You are so emotionally connected to the kids. That also means that emotion transfers to you as a person, right? How do you deal with that? Do you feel, I'm sure there's a feeling of burnout. It's a recurring theme in our country where educators say they feel, burnt out. How do you manage that? How do you deal with it?
Yeah. It's yeah. I used to. My wife used to tell me that. I said, "What can you be tired of? You have the most days off out of anybody you can ask for, but it's emotionally taxing. It really is, and sometimes one thing that has helped me is I wake up early, and I don't know why, just for some reason, I get to work and I put tools away. That is my therapy. That is my bed. I go around my shop and I put some music on low volume, and then that's just my time to de-stress. Because what's very different about teaching than any other job is that when you're teaching, you are there. Your mind is, and all your faculties have to be there, and you don't get to break off of it. You're constantly on stage, and you're constantly under the microscope. Because when I worked at a labor job, I would go on my own train of thought, and I had my own routines. I would go talk to so and so. I had what am I going to make for dinner? What's the plan for the weekend, or whatever. But when you're in the classroom, it's nothing like that at all. So you're always fully engaged in the classroom. If you don't know where to draw the line, it will consume you. If you give students the ability to, they will contact you all day nonstop, students and parents. So you have to be able to draw the line and say, you know what, this is the boundary of where my line and my work starts and ends, and then this is where I have to do what I want to do and enjoy myself.
It's not an easy job for sure, Josh.
Oh,
It's a very difficult job. You said something very interesting, Josh, that you felt that in the classroom it was Josh versus Instagram, right?
mm,
Early on, that students have the choice of interacting with the teacher and being distracted by social media. But I think what I found really interesting, and it'll be great for the audience to know, is how you actually use social media today in building digital portfolios for your students. Where did that idea come that it's not the enemy, it's a
right.
friend, right?
Yeah.
And you hear all these debates in the school on the phone, and they've been going around last 15 years now. But you seem to have again solved that problem in a very effective way.
Right.
So how does it work, and how did it came to be?
It all started because of COVID. I still had to teach the hands-on training that we were providing for during COVID. So I started we were still at the campus, and I told my principal, hey, you know what? Like, we have these students, we have to get their credentialing, we have to give them their credit hours for their lab. If they don't get it, they're not going to be on track. So I got a GoPro, and I had a GoPro, and then I would bring in vehicles on campus, and then I would go through and I would show them, okay, this is how you check engine oil. This is how you check your coolant levels. So I would have different activities. I would record them and I would upload them to the classroom, and then the kids would have to go to their own vehicles and then perform those activities and then report back and create them. So that's how I started making all of the videos. And then the digital portfolios, as soon as there was an incentive allotment coming out from the state of Texas, where we have to now T-test, we have to show the evidence of growth on students. So now I tell my students, if you were to graduate high school and you go to a shop and you have an application, how do you set yourself apart from every other student that graduated high school? Well, we're going to make you a website. So every single student has a website and they have a digital portfolio. And then they include all of the certifications that they get when they're in my class. They put videos of themselves being able to operate different equipment. And it's good for me because they keep track of all of their own learning, and it gives them their target. Because if you give the student the target, then they're able to know where they fall and where they need to be at what point in time. So it kind of makes my job easier because I know the end goal, but do the students know the end goal?
Yeah, I think the portfolios at least do a couple of different things. They help the students themselves understand their progression, right? That, wow, I did this, right? You
Yeah.
look back and see how far you've grown, so it makes them
Mhm.
more confident.
Yeah, it
And then
does.
potential employers, right? They're very marketable, right?
Yeah.
How do the employers and how does the industry react to that? Because
Yeah.
that's,
I
I
ha-
don't think other people even do that
yeah.
who've been in the job market, right? What is their reaction to it?
I have a young lady. Her name is Stephanie, and she's gonna be a senior this year. And Stephanie came in not knowing what a wrench was to my classroom. She had no clue what, other than putting fuel in the car, of anything about a vehicle. And the other day she came in and she came in and she's like, yeah, I have. So they go to the community college, right? And they have their own projects. She had a project where she was changing a part on the vehicle, and she comes in, she's like, yeah, man, I was diagnosing this wheel bearing issue and the ABS. I was looking at the ABS module, and it has no data reporting back to the module. And I was just like, it took me back for a little bit because I knew her when she knew nothing. And now, as she was speaking to me, there's certain jargon that we know as technicians that unless you were a technician, you would not know what she's talking about. And I was just standing there like, and I had a smile on my face, like, Stefan, like, I'm so proud of you. Like, do you hear yourself? Like, I don't think you get to hear yourself talking, but what you just told me it has shown your growth in this whole time that you've been here. Like, how much did you know when you first got here? It's like, nothing. I didn't know anything, sir. I'm like, yeah, I know. And look at you now, so definitely, it definitely shows their progress, and students can track because they forget all of the things that they do throughout the year. And once they look back, they're like, wow, like I have this certification. I know how to operate this, even if they don't use it. And then they go on to get a job. It's gonna come back to them a lot quicker than someone who's never been exposed.
I think that's really remarkable. Those interactions that the new hire had with his coworkers was probably feedback that you got long ago,
Yeah,
that hey, and then you designed the curriculum around it, right? So that feedback loop
yeah,
improved the students, right? And now you
mhm,
actually see that
yeah.
oh, it actually works, right? So having that feedback loop, designing the curriculum, right? Did you see that at play?
Yeah, I hadn't seen it, but when I got the call, I just think a lot of the things take place. They're just not documented, and you don't know about them unless you're being told about them. But at the time, you don't know the effect that you're having at the moment that you're doing it. But it hasn't been just one; it's been multiple students that I've had that have gone to that level. I have another young lady too that she went to Top Fuel in Indianapolis. She was in Top Fuel Dragsters, and I saw her the other day. Went country dancing with my wife, and I saw her, and she approached my wife, and she tells my wife, "You have no clue the impact that this man has had in my life." And man, I almost started crying. She told me, like, my mom always wanted me to go to college. She always wanted me to be a realtor. Like, but I didn't want to do that. Like, I wanted to be outdoors. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to get my hands dirty. She works for a Freightliner, and she travels all over the United States. And she gets called, and she goes and fixes equipment, heavy equipment all over the United States. And she is always posting pictures on Facebook of different locations, all these great restaurants that she's visiting. And to be able to see it come back, and she told my wife about it, it was just awesome, because sometimes as a teacher, you also have doubts sometimes, like, I really wonder if this kid will do anything. I wonder how the future will be for so and so. And for me to be able to see that from her, I didn't do that. I wasn't working at Freightliner. I wasn't traveling all over the United States, being able to do these great things. So to be able to see that in my students is really, it really shows that it works. And it really does. It impacts these students tremendously.
Yeah, that positive feedback loop of the
Yeah.
success is very, it like fuels you up, right?
Yeah. It sure does.
Josh, we live in a world that's constantly changing. There's new technology all around us. AI, there's a lot of talk about AI in education. How do you see artificial intelligence and all these new technologies that are coming up? What is your take on it?
Do you remember when Yahoo came out? I think I was in elementary school,
Yeah.
and everybody was going crazy because they thought the internet was going to take over the world, and there was going to be no jobs for nobody. But look at
Yep.
us now.
Yep.
We're on a conference call, that
Yep.
we would have never thought 50, 20 years ago that would have been able
Yep.
to be possible. So I think technology has its place. I think AI is a great tool. I think when I was younger, when I was working on that go-kart, had I had had I had ChatGPT, how much more growth could I have done in the time being there? Had that been access to me when I was in engineering school, when I needed that extra tutor, when that extra help, and I don't have the means to be able to go hire someone, how crucial could that have been to my learning? It would have been exponentially rewarding for me. So I think it's really good. I think it's in the way it's being used that it has to be very well monitored. And especially with students, man, because students will take the least path of resistance anytime that they can. So I think you have to be creative about how you be able to teach. And I think my class is different than any other class just because of the hands-on. There's no line there. You can fool someone in an English class. You can fool someone in a mathematics class. but we have an actual application of it. I use myself AI for my curriculum. I use it to be a better teacher. I use it for lessons, and I try to tell my students, I know you're using it, and this is how we're going to approach how we use AI, and it's been great. However, it's also has it's bad side, just like the internet. It's good in so many things, and it's unfortunately has its drawbacks on other things. But being able to show students how to responsibly use I think, is really important in knowing the ethics of AI usage.
Understood, Josh. Josh, how do you currently use AI in your class?
We use it for a lot of schematics. We use it for a lot of explanations. Sometimes we have topics that are a little bit more difficult to explain. And then I invite my students, okay, well, if you didn't have me here, how would you approach this problem? I have no clue. Okay, what are your tools? Like, can you use, okay, give me your phone and I'll get my phone and what's really nice about AI is that you can really tailor AI to do what you want it to do. It doesn't just have to be this Google it and get an answer. You know what I'm saying? It can explain processes to you. It's more than just a black and white answer. It can show you how to think about a problem using the scientific approach. How do I approach this problem? You have that access at your fingertips all the time. That is great because sometimes kids will get into positions or in their jobs where you don't know the answer to something. And how do you have a scientific approach, or how do you know that whatever information you're using is correctly referenced, and where is it coming from? Well, use that to your advantage. You're able to have this great tool, it's computer that can say, you know what, I want only credible references. I want only diagnostics from Cummins, from GM, from whatever the case might be. So it's a great tool. I use it myself, like I said, and just showing students how to use it, and I use it and I show them how to use it in my own classroom. So if I'm stuck in a problem, okay, what is the firing order of this engine? How can we access the compression ratio of this engine? How does compression ratio affect the fuel that we're using, or whatever the case might be?
Yeah, yeah. Very interesting. So a very conscious approach to it again, designing the program around it.
Yeah.
Josh, you said something very interesting early on, and about building emotional connections with people. Do you think that changes in the world of AI? So, what is your approach and what is your suggestion to teachers on how to build these kind of emotional connections?
You know, every single year that I have a student, and I start to notice that they're declining in their progress, or whatever the case might be, I always make it a point to call all of my parents, regardless whether my student is doing good or my student is doing bad. And it has gone so far in being able to have a good rapport with my students, because teachers will threaten students all the time. I'm gonna call your parents. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. If you don't follow through, the students will know, and they'll push you. So every single time that I'm about halfway through my semester, I call my students and I say, you know what, man, I just want to call you and let you know that Alan is a great student to have in class. I really like, and sometimes you can talk about academics. Sometimes you can talk about the personalities of every student. Every student is very different, and you can tell. You know what? I really appreciate that he comes every single day. He says hi to me every single morning. He'll come and shake my hand where other students will not. Whatever the case might be, and being able to have a good rapport with parents, because I think that's that emotional connection where parents will know that, and they're excited about their kids wanting to go to you, and it's almost a loop too, because parents will pick up their kids from school and they'll ask, hey, how was school, and what did you do, and then the next day that I've called a parent, the students come into my classroom, you called my mom last night. Like, yes, I did. And I told her so and so, I told her you're a great student I have in class. I told her you can do this better, you can do this, or whatever the case might be. But being able to hold on to that emotional connection is just so important. The other day, I had a dispute on my credit card where somebody charged me wrong, right? I called and the automated machine wanted me to make a dispute. And there was just something about talking to it that I just did not make me feel comfortable. I wanted to talk to an actual person that told me, yes, sir, the dispute has been canceled. Don't worry about it. You're not responsible for these charges and you're going to be just fine. Both of them did exactly the same thing, but just hearing it from a human was just that much more comforting. You know, I don't know if it made any difference, but I mean, if you're ever on a phone call with someone and they smile, you feel it. You know, you see that smile, although you're on the phone. You know, so I just think that those are some things that I don't think will ever be able to take a hold of. That being able to have that relationship with students, that rapport with students, and being able to have parents involved, because ultimately, parents are the ones that are educating their kids. You know, and there's such a big component to student success.
Absolutely. Awesome, Josh. Josh, let's talk a little bit about the future. Now, you've told us a lot, remarkable story, the things that you've done, the problem solving mindset that has led to your success. Let's talk a little bit about where you see this going in the next 10 to 20 years.
I always try to think 5 to 10 years in advance. And I think in 5 to 10 years, what will it look like? And can I apply that now? You know, so when I start, that kind of started with all of COVID because of how much video conferencing was being used. And I thought, in 10 years or 5 to 10 years, how can I apply or how can I be effective at what I do now? And I think being able to keep up with technology and being able to be really flexible in the things that we do. I've had kids. I tell my kids, "Why don't you start a blog? Why don't you have your own YouTube channel, like what it's like to be in the life of a Clint High School student? Like people would love to see what you're about. Like what is class like? Somebody who goes to school in a city, they've never seen a kid ride a horse to school. That would be so cool. And then you get to see what our classroom environment is like. You get to show your project. I've had kids build full cars in my classroom. You know, they have great projects. So being able to scale those things, I think, is going to be very important. It is a lot more work for us. Being able to having to make sure monitor all these things that are taking place ethically, being able to have the technology, the equipment to be able to have there. I think, I hope that career in tech is here to stay because it's so fundamental to student learning in a different way. And I think it's kind of the field that's going to be unique to AI because of how it's made. We have a quote in our shop, and the quote says, "It's not what you buy, it's what you build." A lot of kids now, if you ask them, "What is your favorite car?" "Oh, I want to have a Lamborghini, I don't know, Aventador, whatever the case may be." It's a 400, $500,000 car. When was the last time you asked a kid and they told you, "Oh, I want to build an old muscle car"? You know, that's a $30,000 car. You know what I'm saying? That you get to build, that you get to have the satisfaction of being able to write in something that you made. You know what I'm saying? So being able to have, I think, those classes integrated into schools, I think is going to be, I hope that the future and whoever's making policies in education keeps that in mind because it's still such a human connection that we have to creativity. I'm a spiritual person, so I think when God created the earth, we emulate a lot of His qualities of being able to be a creator and being able to create things. If you've ever built something, I don't know if you're very very hands on yourself. It just has a different feeling about it. It can be anything. It could be a flower pot that your wife put together. It could be a garden. It could be a cabinet. It could be a chair. It could be a piece of furniture in your house. And it just has something different about it. And especially when you're able to make it out of things that would have been thrown away or something. It just has a different meaning. So I really hope that in the next 10 years, uh, still career and technical ed are still around, that they haven't been phased out. I think how we combat that is by being able to make great programs like the one we've created.
So, at your core, what you're saying is that we need to get students to build real things, right? Apply the learning from theoretical knowledge to practical stuff. It excites them, they can relate to it. In terms of education policy, how should they change to enable this approach towards things? What would you say to the policy setters sitting in Austin, Texas, on how
Right.
they should be doing things in the state of Texas today, or nationally, for that matter?
Right. I hope somebody in the state of Texas in legislature has had the ability to be able to build something and be able to experience that feeling. Because unless you do it, it's hard to explain to someone that doesn't relate to that. But I think for the most part, how many blue collar jobs are out there that are making this whole nation run? I mean, the railroad alone, I think they said if the railroad were to shut down, it would bring the economy down. It's all just blue collar workers that are being able to make that happen. So I hope that if somebody were to be able to listen, just being able to keep giving us the resources to be able to do our job. But if you cut those resources from us, then we're left pretty much powerless.
You've helped shape not just a classroom, but a community of learners. Josh, you've had an impact on real lives. If you could distill your journey into one guiding principle on how should they innovate. I'm a teacher out there. I have my students in front of me, but I don't know what to do. What would you tell them? How should they try to innovate? What would be your advice to them?
I think they have to learn to love whatever they teach themselves first before it can be taught. You have to really show that you love what you do before the students can see that. And I think if you're passionate about it, if you're excited about it, I think students can see it, and they're also excited to learn. So I think find that thing that you wanna inspire other students to do. Be good at it yourself, and try to inspire these kids to be able to do the same. I think there's a quote by Earl Nightingale. Man, I think it goes something like, "Our contributions are in exact proportion to our service." So, what can you give, and can you really think of what is it that you're wanting to do when you're in the teach when you're in as a when you're being a teacher, and do you want to really inspire kids? And if you don't, then you're doing them a disservice. If you were to not be in your classroom, would the kids be better or would the kids be worse? So if you have to really find that. I think I found my passion. I was really fortunate to be able to find it at a young age. I don't know the steps of how to do it. I just know that if you're passionate about it and you like it, you can inspire kids to learn it.
Awesome, Josh. Thank you so much, Josh. I really enjoyed the conversation today. It was so nice to meet and learn about your views and the impact. I think the BTech program is an absolute success. But what we learned today is that it's been engineered to do that. So your engineer, background, is back at its at the forefront, where you did all these very interesting and unique things that other educators can learn about. Josh, thank you so much for all the work that you do, for the impact that you've had. and for the future directions that educators in our country can learn from to build these kind of practical, success-oriented programs that contribute to real skills that can be applied, and students who are excited about building stuff. We are ultimately a country of builders. Thank you so much, Josh, for all the work.
Thank you. Thank you for the time. It's been an honor being here.
Thank you, Josh.